Hi and welcome to my channel. In this video I'll show you how to replace pretty much everything in a W210 Mercedes-Benz air conditioning system, including the expansion valve, compressor, receiver dryer, and even I'll show you how to charge the system with fresh Freon, how to vacuum all the moisture out. The only two things I'm not showing you how to replace are the evaporator and the condenser. Everything else is included. And part one, I'm going to show you how to replace your expansion valve. Here's the workshop manual. It has the steps and summary, but nothing in detail, so continue to watch the video. You can pause and see the instructions on a large screen. The expansion valve is located right below where you see the screwdriver now, underneath and behind all those plastic pieces. The first of which you remove using a Phillips screwdriver. There are a total of 6 or so screws. You remove those one by one. The rest then come out. They're held by clips, all kinds of clips, and you'll see that as I'm taking them out. And there are a couple of plastic rivets too that I remove with a chisel, and you don't need to replace those. And this rubber piece comes out very easily, and you can put it back in just as easily also. Now, anytime you want to remove or replace any of your air conditioning components, you will have to replace the receiver dryer. If you don't, you risk having to do the job all over again. So for example, if you replace your compressor, you'll have to also replace your receiver dryer. Condenser the same way. Expansion valve, as here, you'll have to then also replace your receiver dryer. And before you open up the AC system, you have to have the system evacuated professionally by someone, unless you have the equipment. Even though our 134A Freon is not as dangerous to the environment, but still you want to comply with your local laws. This piece you take out, you just pull it out. It allows you to reach one of the screws. The wiper arm I didn't need to remove, but I did. I thought I did. You don't have to. The wiper assembly is held by 3 nuts, one to the right as you see here, and I think they're 10 or 13 millimeter nuts. So you need a set of metric sockets, one on the left as you see here, and then another one to the left of the brake fluid reservoir right there. And then this white clip, you unclip it with a flat-headed screwdriver, and then it moves out. There's an electrical connector. You press the 2 ends of it inwards at the same time as you're pulling it out. It comes out easy. And then you remove the entire assembly out of the way. Just like I said, be patient. Don't force anything out, otherwise you risk, especially these cars are now very old, you risk breaking things. And so if you see resistance, keep looking for another clip until you find it, and then undo the clip. And this piece here, this is the right air inlet and the workshop instructions. You put this to the side, and using pliers you remove, you undo it, and then by hand the rest of the way. These are the 2 screws that the top 2 nuts of holding the wiper assembly connect to. and the plastic rivets, I had to chisel them out. There are two of them. So now this large plastic piece has to come out before you can get to the expansion valve, and this is I guess I tried to shortcut the process, and I should have removed the white bracket you see there to the left that holds the wiper arm, the wiper assembly. I should have removed that, and I didn't. And that white bracket is held just by one nut or bolt, as you see here in the bottom of the screen. If I had done that, then this whole piece would have just come out very easily. I maneuvered to get it out without breaking it, using using an assistant. But for me, this was the hardest piece. For you, it shouldn't be. And right there's a rubber grommet that gives you access. You move that out, and there's a hole, gives you access to the nut that holds the two pressure lines to the expansion valve. And now, if you take the bracket out and the water collector, the black water collector, then you don't need to go through that hole to get to that nut. As you'll see later in the video, once I do take it out, when I put everything back in, I realize I cannot torque it, so then I have to take that out. But when you remove, this is an 8mm, I believe, hex socket. These two screws are holding the expansion valve to the evaporator in the back under the dash. So first you remove the hex nut, the 10mm hex nut that holds the two pressure lines to the expansion valve, and then the two screws. And then if you have an air gun, just press some air into the evaporator. This is the point where if you have the right chemicals in the machine to wash the evaporator. Some people do that. If yours is dirty, maybe you should, but I didn't. Compare the new expansion valve to the old unit. Make sure you have the right part, and I'll have the part in the description for the W210. Anytime you take out the pressure lines, make sure you cover the end of the lines with the ends with something. I used aluminum foil here. And also when you put things back together, this is the 8mm socket that I use for the two screws. Anytime you put the lines back in, you want to make sure you have new rubber gaskets, or rubber O-rings they're called, and I'll have those parts in the description too. So here somehow I managed to even torque the two 8mm screws. The torque value is 8 Newton meters for these two. So I managed to insert a socket and a wrench there and torque it. And it's crucial that you torque this correctly, that you have a torque wrench, because otherwise you risk, of course, risk leaks, Freon leaks, and you'll have to do the whole thing all over again. There's a hole that bracket that the screw goes through in the bracket, and that bracket holds the two pressure lines. The larger in diameter of the two is the low pressure line. The smaller one is the high pressure line. Those are new rubber gaskets, and so that bracket holds the lines together, and the hex nut, the 10mm nut that I couldn't get to from there. So this is how easy it is to remove the white bracket that holds the wiper assembly. You just remove some of those wires out of the way, and then you remove the white piece and then the water collector, and as you'll see in a second, this is how easy to get to that nut from the left side without the water collector in the way, and also to torque it. And I torqued it by hand, but I've done this a lot. With experience you learn how much force to apply, but if you are not experienced, you can get crowfoot wrenches, they call them. You can get them at Harbor Freight or anywhere, and using those torque this to 10 Newton meters. The installation is just reverse of the removal procedure, and I don't have that in the video. It is very easy. So let's move on to replacing the compressor. It's a lot simpler than replacing the expansion valve. It will also not take as much time. You may need an assistant here and there, but let's get it started. That's the one marked as number 2 on the diagram I just showed you. Use an inverted E10 torque socket to remove the build. Of course, you want to jack up the car on jack stands, or drive the car up first on ramps before you do this, and then remove the bottom paneling. And it's best to start the work from under the car. Find the compressor first, and then by touch locate the 2 lines, the pressure lines that come to the compressor. One comes from the expansion valve, and that's the low pressure line. It's the larger of the 2. It's the one with the black rounded big top. And the low pressure line is the metallic looking one there that connects to the condenser. The condenser is in the front of the car by the radiator, and that's the one that connects to the condenser. The high pressure line is the smaller in diameter of the 2. You want to remove the low pressure line first, because of the top of it is kind of big and it blocks the bolt to the high pressure line. The bolts are undone using 6mm hex sockets, if I'm not mistaken. And you can use a wrench from the bottom to kind of push away the 2 pressure lines out of the compressor. Remove the electrical connector from the compressor first by just pulling it, and then the 3 Torx bolts connecting the compressor to the engine or chassis. And you'll use the inverted E12 Torx sockets to remove these 3 bolts. And of course, as you remove the last one, you'll need to kind of hold the compressor in place. You can remove the compressor either from the top or from the bottom. It's easier to do it from the top. Compare the new to the old. The new compressor comes with, some of them come pre-filled with compressor oil, some don't. Regardless, you want to empty the compressor from any pre-filled oil, and you do that by take a jar or some vessel and weigh it first to see what the weight of the vessel is, or the glass bottle in this case, and then turn the clutch as you empty the oil. This is PAG 46 oil, or at least you want to fill it back up with new PAG 46 oil. I'll have that in the description. Mercedes-Benz recommends 120 cubic centimeters of PAG oil for the compressor, and that is the equivalent of 4.05 ounces of oil. You can buy an 8-ounce bottle, and that should be more than sufficient. Pour the oil through both holes and turn the clutch so that the oil goes through and all the way throughout the inside and comes back from the other side. You will have to turn it left and right gradually and slowly until you see the oil basically coming out from the top, but no more than 4 ounces. I don't think the capacity of these compressors is more than 4 ounces, but then you want to screw the plugs back in, the plugs that come with the compressor tight, and you want to wear glasses, of course, when you're in the bottom of the car. You don't want the oil to fall on your eyes. And then the installation procedure is just the opposite of what you did before. First, you tighten the bolts, the 3 Torx bolts, compressor to the chassis or engine, and then the 2 connector lines. Do the high pressure line first, and then do the low pressure line, just reverse of what you did before, and then you'll have to torque them to 20 Newton meters. 20 Newton meters or 14.75 foot-pounds. That is true for all of the 5 bolts. The 2 hex bolts connecting the pressure lines, as well as the 3 Torx bolts connecting the compressor to the chassis. As you can see here, I'm removing the plugs first, and at this point, once you install the compressor, oil will not fall out of it. You remove the plugs and then connect the lines. Like I said, first the high pressure line, then the low pressure line. And that's pretty much it. So of course, anytime you replace your compressor, you will have to replace the receiver dryer. Every time you replace any of the components, including the lines in your AC unit, you must replace the receiver dryer. It's really a very cheap part, $13 or so in 2019 from fcpeuro.com. It's the Rain model. You purchase that and install it as the last item that you install, and that's exactly what I'm going to replace next, so stay tuned. The receiver dryer on these cars is located right next to the washer fluid reservoir. You'll have to jack up the front of the car, at least the driver's side, to gain access to it from under the car. Press the clip to remove the electric connector to the refrigerant pressure sensor. Once you press the clip, you just pull it out. It comes out very easily. Next, you use I think a 19mm wrench to remove the pressure line on the other side of the pressure sensor. Be sure to recover the rubber gasket and then cover the end of this line with something. I use aluminum foil to cover it. Depending on the age and condition of your rubber gaskets, you may be able to reuse them. I suggest you replace both gaskets though. There are two 13mm bolts, if I'm remembering correctly, holding the receiver dryer unit to the frame. Remove the underbody cover first and then the other pressure line from under the car. A car's AC dryer is an important component of a car's refrigeration system. It stores refrigerant and it also filters debris and moisture. You'll want to replace it every time you replace any of your car's AC components, including things like everything: condenser, evaporator, expansion valve, compressor, the low and high pressure lines. Of course, you need to replace it also when it goes bad, and it's not easy to tell if it's bad. But some symptoms are things like refrigerant leaks, moldy smell inside the cabin when you turn on the AC, rattling noises coming from the receiver dryer. Finally, remove the electric connector to the refrigerant temperature sensor. You don't necessarily need to replace these, and I'll not go into the diagnosis process to determine whether these two sensors are good or bad. You can search the net for procedures to test the temperature and pressure sensors. Be sure to compare the old and the new units first. I'm using the Hansa model. Don't buy the Bear version or any others besides Hansa. Rain is good, of course, and the Mercedes brand. The Rain brand is very cheap at $13 in 2019 from FCP Euro, and it's guaranteed for life, so check that out. Minimize the amount of time when the receiver dryer is exposed to the atmosphere. Remove the old sensor from the old unit first, then undo the bolt, the little bolt-looking cover on the new unit. There are two of those, and then immediately insert the screw and the sensor, screw in the sensors into the new unit. The rest is pretty straightforward. You just reverse the removal procedure. I usually apply a little TFE paste I buy from Ace Hardware in the US to all plumbing joints to minimize leaks. And of course you want to rub the rubber gaskets, the two at the end of your pressure lines with some PAG 46 oil or AC compressor oil. Of course, after everything is buttoned up, you will have to evacuate all the moisture and air from the entire system and then charge it with new refrigerant. And guess what? That's what we are doing next. Charging an AC system is something that used to be done by specialized shops. Nowadays, this job is easily accessible to the tree-shaped mechanic, so really the equipment is also a lot cheaper to procure. If you want to have your own equipment, you can do that. I have links in the description. You can have the AC manifold gauge purchased very cheaply from Amazon and other places for $32 or so. You can also rent the AC manifold gauge as well as the vacuum pump from many local stores in the US. First, you kind of pull that red part, and as you pulling it, you press it onto the port and then release. That's how it connects, and make sure everything is tight. That was the red or the high pressure line. The blue one is there, and then you the yellow line goes to the pump, and this is the first of 2 or 3 pumps, vacuum pumps. So you connect it to the vacuum pump and turn it on. And then turning the knobs left, you open up the gauge and you'll see the dial moving towards the negative numbers, especially look in the blue dial, and you see it's hovering around minus 28. So it is pumping air and moisture out of the system. And that's crucial. You want to do that before you charge Freon into the system, because what destroys air conditioning systems is air and moisture. And so after about an hour, you close the blue and red knobs by turning both to the right, and afterwards you turn off the pump. Make sure you do it in that sequence. And then you kind of leave it at least for 1 hour. I would suggest at least 1 hour. Some people do it overnight, a day, a full day. And then you come back and you check the reading and make sure it's exactly the same as before. If it's not, that means you have a leak and you have to fix it. Otherwise, you move on to step 3, which is pumping again. So at least 1 more hour, I would say. Open up this time just the left knob. Open up both. I was confusing this with when you charge. When you charge the system, you only open up the blue knob. So open up both and pump for at least 1 hour, and then close both knobs, and then disconnect the yellow line from the pump. You're done vacuuming the system, and at this point you take the yellow line that you disconnected from the pump and you connect it to the first of 4 cans of R134A without any additives, because hopefully you have oil in the system. If you don't, then you want to get cans with oil, and that will require a different calculation. But look on the label under the hood and you'll see for your type of car. I've included the numbers for the W210 and W220 with front only or front and rear air conditioning. Here's the tab. The gauge I reference in the description comes with a can tab, and so the mechanism works in such a way that you turn the knob on the tap and that pierces the can, and then you'll wait to hear a hissing sound. That means that now Freon is making it out of the can into the yellow line, and then you back it off a little bit, and so that means that Freon is now making it from the yellow line all the way into the gauge. But there still should be some air in the yellow line. So then you go to the gauge and you open it up a little bit, the yellow line, until you hear hissing sound there at the gauge, which means that now some Freon is coming out and escaping into the atmosphere. And you keep it open just for a couple of seconds, and then you close it tight. And at this point, that means there's nothing but Freon inside the yellow line. So the Freon at this point is going from the can all the way to the gauge, and then you open up the blue knob, and that allows the Freon to make it to go from the yellow into the blue line, and then into the port in the car, the low pressure port, and from there into the AC system. And so you'll see the dial move to plus number here, about 20 or so. And so then you have to turn on the car and the AC system. The temperature to the lowest setting, the fan to the maximum. And then you watch the compressor clutch, make sure that is turning. And of course, the radiator fan should also come on at some point when it gets hot enough. And then you'll see the dial on the red gauge also moving. Here you'll see after, I think I'm here down to, this may be the second can, or sorry, it's the first can, and it's right above 100 psi and the high pressure side. And follow the instructions on the can, and each can will empty in about 10 to 20 minutes, so be a little patient. And also use a shot towel or something to hold the can, because it might get cold, too cold for your hand. And you keep going until it goes, here's a chart that I have copied from the Mercedes workshop manual. Use it's for two models. Use the one on the right for the E320. And you see the blue and pink lines that I've drawn. You'll have to do that for your ambient temperature. I've done it for 35 degrees centigrade, and you may have to convert these to Fahrenheit and PSI. On the left, you'll see bar numbers. And for the humidity level, whether it's between 40 and 80%, but you kind of have an assistant press on the accelerator and turn the engine to 1,500 RPM for a final reading, and then make sure you within 20 plus minus percent. That you get a reading that matches the chart, the reading in the chart. And then you're done. You just disconnect the gauge lines from the ports on the car, and your AC should be running freezing cold at that point. If you have any questions, post them in the comments, and I hope you like this video. Like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye.